The word they used most was useless, not angry, not emotional, just casual, like it was obvious, like it was a fact everyone already agreed on. And somehow, that made it worse, because insults shouted in anger eventually fade, but quiet disrespect, that stays, especially when it comes from family. I honestly can't remember the first time they said it, because eventually it became normal. Small comments at dinner, little jokes during family gatherings, the kind people pretend are harmless. You wouldn't understand. Let your brother handle it. She's not exactly reliable. Different words, same meaning. Useless. And after enough years, you stop defending yourself. Not because they're right, because you get tired. Tired of proving your value to people determined not to see it. My older brother, Ethan, was the opposite. Successful, confident, loud. The kind of person families proudly build conversations around. Every achievement he made became a family story. Every mistake I made became a family identity. That's how it worked. And over time, everyone accepted those roles naturally, even me. Looking back now, that's the dangerous part about family narratives. Once they assign you a role, they stop seeing who you actually are. One evening during dinner, my father laughed and said, "At least one of our kids turned out useful." Everyone smiled, even my mother, even Ethan, and honestly, that hurt more than the comment itself, because nobody corrected it. Nobody even hesitated, like humiliating me publicly had become completely normal. I remember staring down at my plate quietly, not reacting, not arguing, because if I reacted, I'd become dramatic, sensitive, difficult. Family systems are funny like that. The person being hurt always becomes the problem for noticing it. A few weeks later, everything escalated. Not suddenly, predictably. My father called a family meeting. That alone felt strange. Nobody called meetings for me, only around me. I walked into the living room and immediately knew something was wrong. Too much silence, too much preparation. My mother sat stiffly beside him. Ethan leaned against the wall, casually, comfortable, like he already knew how this conversation ended. "We think it's time you become independent," my father began. Independent, another soft word people use, right before cutting someone off. I stayed quiet, listening, because something about his tone felt rehearsed. "We've supported you long enough," my mother added carefully. That almost made me laugh. Supported me? I worked 2 jobs while finishing school, paid most of my own expenses, stayed invisible enough to avoid becoming another family disappointment. But apparently, reality changes when people repeat a different version long enough. "We can't keep carrying dead weight," Ethan said casually. Dead weight. That one landed differently, because unlike my parents, he enjoyed saying it. That part mattered. I looked around the room slowly, and for the first time, I realized something important. This wasn't a conversation. It was a decision already made. They weren't discussing my future. They were removing me from theirs. "You're kicking me out," I said quietly. My father sighed immediately. "We're helping you grow? Interesting. Because betrayal always sounds kinder when the people causing it rename it." I nodded, slowly, not emotional, just aware, because suddenly everything made sense. The years of dismissal, the constant disrespect, the way they minimized every contribution I made. They needed me to believe I was worthless, because people who believe they're worthless don't fight back, and maybe that was their biggest mistake. I moved out 3 days later, not because I agreed with them, not because I accepted what they said, just because I understood something clearly now. There's no point staying where people already decided your value. And my family, They decided years ago, quietly, consistently, completely. So I left. No dramatic goodbye, no emotional speech, just boxes, silence, and the strange feeling of finally seeing people clearly. Looking back now, that was the real beginning. Not getting kicked out, waking up, because once you stop trying to earn respect from people, determined not to give it, you start building differently, more carefully, more independently. And that's exactly what I did. Months passed, then more, and for the first time in my life, I stopped hearing their voices every day, stopped hearing what I supposedly couldn't do, couldn't become, couldn't handle. And without that constant noise, something unexpected happened. I started succeeding quietly, not publicly, not dramatically, just steadily. One job became 2 opportunities. One opportunity became connections. And slowly, the life they thought I couldn't build started building itself. Meanwhile, I barely heard from my family anymore. At first, occasional texts from my mother, mostly guilt disguised as concern. Hope you're okay. Family misses you. Interesting how people suddenly miss you after removing you. But I stayed distant, not angry, just aware, because once people show you how easily they can discard you, you stop trusting temporary kindness. Then one evening, everything changed. My phone rang unexpectedly. My father, that alone felt strange. He never called, first, ever. I answered quietly. Hello? Silence. Then, we need to talk. Those 4 words immediately told me something was wrong. Not emotionally, financially, because families like mine only reconnect urgently when something collapses. And judging by his voice, something definitely had. I agreed to meet the next day. Same house, same driveway, same people, but the energy felt completely different now. No confidence, no superiority, no casual disrespect, just tension, heavy tension. Ethan looked exhausted. My mother avoided eye contact immediately. And my father, he suddenly looked much older. Interesting how quickly arrogance disappears under pressure. What happened? I asked calmly. Nobody answered immediately. That silence alone said enough. Finally, my father cleared his throat. The company is in trouble. Company? Of course. The family business. The same business Ethan proudly inherited while I got treated like a burden. I stayed quiet, listening, because suddenly I understood why I was there. Not because they missed me, not because they regretted anything, because they needed something. And that realization, it didn't hurt anymore. It just felt predictable. We're facing legal issues, Ethan admitted quietly. That surprised me. Not the problem, the humility, because for the first time in his life, he sounded uncertain, real uncertain. How serious? I asked. Nobody answered immediately, again. Another bad sign. Finally, my mother whispered, we could lose everything. There it was, the truth, complete. And suddenly, the entire room felt different, because now, they weren't looking at me like dead weight anymore. They were looking at me like a solution. Interesting how quickly value changes during emergencies. I leaned back slightly, then asked calmly, what does this have to do with me? That question made everyone uncomfortable instantly, because now they had to say it out loud. They had to acknowledge something they spent years denying. My father rubbed his forehead slowly. The backup account? Pause. Then, it's under your name. Silence. Not from them, from me. Because suddenly, everything clicked together perfectly. Years earlier, when I was still living at home, my grandfather helped me set up financial structures for tax purposes. Quiet, legal arrangements, emergency holdings, contingency protections. At the time, I barely understood the details, but apparently, those details mattered now, a lot. You're the only legal fallback left, Ethan admitted quietly. That sentence felt unreal, not because of revenge, because of irony. The same people who spent years calling me useless had accidentally built their survival around me, and they didn't even realize it until now. Looking back, that might be the funniest part of the entire story. People become so focused on disrespecting you, they stop noticing what you actually are. My mother finally looked at me directly. We need your help. Simple words, but heavy, because those words would have been impossible for her months earlier. Pride changes quickly when survival enters the conversation. I stayed calm, not enjoying their panic, not rushing to save them either, just observing, because once people spend years reducing your value, you notice very carefully how they act when they suddenly need it. Ethan leaned forward slightly. If the account freezes, everything collapses. I nodded slowly. So now I matter. Silence. Again, because nobody could deny it. Not honestly, and for the first time in years, they had no version of reality that protected them. No narrative. No convenient role to place me in. Just facts. Real ones. My father looked genuinely ashamed, suddenly. We were hard on you, hard on me. Interesting phrase, like years of emotional humiliation were just discipline. I almost smiled, because accountability always shrinks after consequences arrive. You called me dead weight, I said, quietly. Ethan looked down immediately. Good. Not because I wanted guilt, because I wanted recognition. Real recognition. Not rewritten history, not softened versions. Truth. Complete truth. My mother's voice cracked slightly. We made mistakes. And honestly, that was probably the closest thing to honesty I'd ever heard from her. I looked around the room slowly.